Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this short presentation about learning transfer. We are delighted to be here as People Untapped today to have this opportunity to share with you something that's really passionate and really important to us, which is about learning transfer. So we're hoping that in the next 25 minutes, you're going to experience an engaging, interactive and fun session with us. So as L&D professionals or HR people within organisations, you've got something really tangible to take away with you. So my name is Gillian Kenward. I'm the Chief Client Officer at People Untapped. I'm actually here as the understudy today because our fabulous Chief Executive Officer, Marissa, at the back, woke up unable to speak this morning. So when I woke up this morning, I wasn't expecting to be on this stage. So it is a pleasure to be with you. If I refer back to notes, please bear with me. But this is something that we work with very regularly within our organisation. So it's a tool that I'm very familiar with. But it's nice to be an understudy. I got promoted today. My job at People Untapped as a Chief Client Officer is I will look after a number of our key clients, but also am responsible for our management development program. We have a number of different learning and development offerings. So management development program is one of our key offerings. And also I get the joy of actually still being in the room training with our fabulous clients. I'm joined here with wonderful colleague, Catherine. So I'm going to hand over to Catherine for her to introduce herself.
Hello, lovely audience at World of Learning. Lovely to see you all here. Thank you for coming. My name is Catherine. Just a brief introduction. I'm the Client and Commercial Director at People Untapped. I also look after some key clients and I lead on our Matrix development program as well as other leadership development offerings, just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we focus on. Handing straight back to Gillian.
Thank you, Catherine. So today we're going to be focused, as I say, on learning transfer, and that's important for a number of reasons. Obviously, there's the ROI for your perspective when you're investing in learning and development, but also from the learner's perspective to make sure that the learning really is sticky and transfers outside the training room environment. And that's something, I say, we're really passionate about. When we think about our values, it's something that's, again, important to us. And this is where I hand over to Catherine.
Don't worry, we're not going to talk to you about our organizational values. We want to pick up on one specific value, which is this one here. It's being bold. Last week, when I was looking at LinkedIn, I saw one of the LD professionals that I follow on LinkedIn. I saw a shout out for the L&D community to be bolder, to have a place in the room, to get a place at the table, and to move from fulfilling the short-term needs to the longer-term needs of the business, to be moving from an order taker to be an enabler in the business, and from developing people on singular capabilities to linking departments and the intersections between culture, learning and development, organizational development. That's one thing that we feel really passionate about, and we'd also like to instill in you as the L&D community to be feeling bold and hopefully to be walking out of this presentation today with one or two actions of being bolder within your organizations.
So why is learning transfer important? We talk about it quite regularly, but why is it important? Well, the research is shown by Training Zone that 186% increase in learning impact if we consider and take actions to make sure that we put in place learning transfer activities. And through the conversation this afternoon, we're going to share with you some hints and tips as how you can do that. But as you can see, it's a significant proportion in terms of the impact that we can have if we make sure that we have learning transfer. So what is learning transfer? We hear it coming up time and time again. There are various definitions, but the one I want to share with you today is really about the ability to apply that mindset of skills and behaviours that have been acquired in one context, in a different context, in a different environment. It's making sure that we embed that learning, that we listen and we take action, particularly on what we've learned. It's not a passive place to be. This is very much about accountability and ownership for the learner, but also for those of us that are designing programs and within organizations, making sure that we take this element seriously. When we think about impact of this, interestingly, between about 5 and 18% of L&D professionals consider learning transfer as part of their design process. That means that there's a significant amount of us that when we're designing a program or we're thinking about an intervention, we're thinking about getting it done. We're not thinking about the long-term learning transfer. So that's a really important part for us. If we think about the impact of our training, I know a number of us would, at the end of programs, will do satisfaction surveys or get polls in terms of how people have responded to the training. But only 18% of organizations consider the long-term learning transfer. So what that looks like 3 months, 6 months down the line. So again, this is something that we're really passionate about. When we think about getting support internally from our stakeholders, only 20% of L&D professionals or HR colleagues get support for learning programs within their organization. 20%. That is not high. So how can we make sure we can demonstrate the impact and the opportunity there are for having learning programs internally? To complete the learning transfer cycle, there is this concept about the brain feeling that they've had fun and enjoyment during the process, to make sure that the activities that we put in place are engaging for our brains. And again, if we know that we've had fun, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about shortly, then we're more likely to remember our learning experience, and therefore the longevity and the transfer is going to be much more impactful for us. I think this stat might be quite familiar to a number of us, because we recognise that after we leave a programme, unless we do something quickly, the learning transfer dissipates. So after 1 hour of leaving a programme, 50% of our learning is retained. Once we get to 40 hours, we go to 70%. Once we get to 1 week, we're at about 90%. So the retention drains from leaving the course to our implementation. So what we really want to focus here is time is crucial. What can you do internally? What can you do as a learner to make sure that you put in practice the activities and the learning that you've experienced? And that's where scheduling is really important. So what can be done from the learner's perspective and what can be done from an organizational perspective to schedule that learning opportunity, that putting it into practice after a program has taken place. So we have come up with this snazzy new model. This is a new learning transfer model that we have from our experience, from our research that we've been doing with our clients, and it's known as habit. And some of you will know it takes around 66 days for us to embed a habit. Well, we want to try and accelerate that through this model. And for those of you that are in the main plenary, hopefully you've got a postcard with this on it. For those of you around the side, Marissa at the back has got copies of this, so we can absolutely share it with you. Because again, we just like the simplicity of this and the importance of creating habits when it comes to learning transfer. So let's have a look at this. So in terms of H is for harness. How can we harness the organization? How can we harness the culture to ensure that learning stickiness is something that's considered as part of our learning design? This is a systematic approach. This needs to be supported by all parts within the organization to make sure that the system is accepting this. Secondly, it's about aligning the learning transfer, making sure that it's practical and it's aligned to the learning, to the work environment, the individual's experience. And that's why when we're working with clients, we tailor our learning programs to make sure that they're aligned to the real life experience that individuals have within their organization. It's also about building confidence for our learners in terms of using their skills, practicing, trying them, making sure that they've got that experience. It's about integrating this into their workflow. So whether that's your PDPs, whether that's through your appraisal process, whether that's through your one-to-ones that you have with individuals, it's about how do we integrate so that at those manager conversations, individuals are being asked, being explored by their managers in terms of what they've learned. And then importantly, it's about tracking progress. As I mentioned earlier, quite often we'll do, or organisations will have an after-action review or a satisfaction after training. What we're interested in is that long-term impact. How can we track that for the long term? So again, that's the final part. And this is where it's an integrated cycle. So it's a constantly evolving, constantly reviewing as we move through the different stages of this model. So how can we bring this to life? What practical things can you do to bring this habit to life? So when we think about how do we harness it, it's things around priming the organisation, making sure the organisation's ready, making sure that we promote the learning opportunities and the learning experiences, and making sure that we validate it, making sure that it's valid and resonates with the learner's journey and their learning experience within their organisation. In terms of aligning, making sure that we engage, making sure that it's relevant, making sure that it's personal to them. So having personal learning goals, engaging the organisation, engaging line leaders is hugely important in terms of maximising learning transfer. When we're thinking about building, I mentioned earlier that part of our experience of learning is if the brain recognises it's had fun during that learning experience. So this is how do we build fun into the learning experience? How do we make sure that it's real for the individuals? How do we test their experience? And things like undertaking activities in the sessions, focus groups, other ways can really help us really make sure that the interaction of the individuals is fun and is real and is aligned to what they're doing. In terms of integrating, this is where, again, line managers, as I mentioned before, are critical. Quite often, individuals, when we're training them, they'll say that the manager doesn't know that they're on the course, so the manager isn't bothered. This is where, as line managers, we have a really important role to play. So how we can support it, what the process is internally, but also making sure that there's accountability at the learner, but also for the organisation. And finally, when we think about tracking, it's about recognising the experience that the individuals had, making sure that we report, that we follow up, yes, after the session, but at intervals subsequently, and also making sure that we promote the opportunity, we promote the opportunities for learning internally so that individuals can see the clear line of sight between what they've learned and actually applying that in the real life for them. Okay, so that is our habit. But we were really interested in finding out your experience. So,
thank you so much, Gillian. So this is our learning transfer model, as Gillian has just taken you through it. And we know that some of this won't be new to you. We also know through our conversations with our clients and other L&D professionals that there are some challenges often making this work, often making this stick. So really, we want to ask you a few questions. What are your biggest challenges that you face around learning transfer? And we're going to be doing this just through a simple hand ups kind of exercise. And we're just going to sort of gauge the room and then go into the areas that are most important for you, most important in terms of your needs. So, is your biggest challenge around linking learning to business objectives? Is that one of your challenges? If so, could you just raise your hand? Okay, we've got about 2 or 3 people, 4, 5 possibly, who raised their hand for that. What about the second one? A lack of senior leader buy-in. Is that one of your challenges? Yeah, a few more people who've raised their hand on that, okay. What about lack of line manager engagement? Oh, yes, I can see quite a few arms going up on that one. Thank you. Lack of learner time and capacity. My goodness, I think that's the biggest amount. Thank you. And last but not least, measuring ROI and impact. Quite a few hands as well. Okay, so I think we had the biggest amount of feedback here on this learner time capacity. But is there also something else that is a challenge for you when you're thinking about learning transfer? We've only picked out a few of the key ones that we hear about. Is there something else that is a challenge for you and that might be worth sharing with this community here? And if so, I'm very happy to hand over the microphone to you. Any other challenges?
Tech and tools.
Absolutely. So there's something about tech and how to integrate tech as part of the learning transfer. We will be speaking a little bit about tech in a moment. Thank you.
So we have a large volume of mandatory compliance training that has to be done on an annual basis. So everyone's a bit learning fatigued, I think, and a bit kind of overwhelmed by it all.
Thank you so much for that contribution. So a bit of learning fatigue for mandatory training that happens regularly. We'll be speaking to that right at the end of our presentation. Thank you. I think I had another hand over here.
Thank you. Around learner motivation, so if it's something that the organisation wants, but the learner is really just trying to tap into how we can get the what's in it for them out. So that's a bit of a challenge.
Thank you. So around learner motivation, any other challenges that we've got in the room? No. Okay. So I think looking at the time, I think what we're going to do is we're going to briefly talk you through our top tips. We'll make sure we'll give you quite a bit of attention when we get to lack of learner time and capacity. We'll be linking into motivation. When we're looking at ROI and impact, we'll be talking about tech. And we'll be, finding out about motivation as well. Good. So here are some of our top tips for linking learning to business objectives. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but please do take pictures if you'd like. These are some of the key findings that we're finding in our client work in terms of getting a clear understanding of your organization's business goals and the performance impact that is desired. Now, that sounds quite simple and straightforward, and often it isn't, because it means investing some time, it means investing effort, it means asking questions. And sometimes, in my experience, when I deal with clients, maybe whose industry or sector I don't know so well, it also means asking what feels like stupid questions. And that doesn't feel good, does it? Yet really important to understand, what does this business really want to achieve? Where are the points? Where does the CEO want to go? What's the vision for the next year, but also the next 3 or 5 years? How is tech? That is so important, right? When you look around world of learning, tech plays such a big role here in this space. How does tech align to it? How does AI come into it? Generative AI? All these questions. You can see we've got some pieces here around actively engaging with your senior leaders and higher management on here, seeking information about industry shifts. So a place like World of Learning, where you are learning today, we would just advise you, and this is what we're intending to do, to go back to your businesses and talk about what you've learned. Go onto LinkedIn and share your findings. Right? Because you're creating some FOMO here as well. Other people will want to know what you've learned. And your senior leaders will want to know that as well. And finding the measures of success that align to business needs. Gillian, you've already mentioned that earlier when we looked at our habit framework. And this last point I just briefly want to mention, because it's that cost of inaction that doesn't often come into business conversations, at least in our experience. Most people will want to talk about the impact, the learning impact, the performance impact, the return on investment. But what is that cost of inaction, right? And I do have a quote here, which I want to share with you. Sorry. John F. Kennedy, it's a quote that we haven't got on here, but John F. Kennedy once said, "There are risks and costs to action, but they are far less than the long-range risks of comfortable inaction." So have a think about that, because inaction is comfortable, right? It's far easier not to do anything than to do something, right? You will all know about what it feels like being in the comfort zone. You will want to motivate learners to move into the learning zone without going into the panic zone. So think for yourselves, what is it that I can do to articulate that cost of inaction to my senior leaders? Moving on. getting senior leader buy-in. Somebody came to our stand earlier and said, apparently a lot of people are speaking about that lack of senior leader buy-in. There was somebody called Jake who mentioned it earlier. Jake, if you're here, this is your point. And really what we see is a clear and strong learning strategy is the first step to solving this challenge. Being clear on how your strategy will tie in with the wider business goals and targets is absolutely crucial here. And this question, what's in it for leadership, will also appeal to the people in the leaders, right? What's in it for them? How can I motivate them? How can I appeal to the facts? Or how can I appeal with the facts, the evidence, and the data, with the logos? But also, how can I appeal to their emotions, right? The pathos. And how can I bring my credentials of my L&D department, my HR organization, to the table and appealing to the ethos? So really aiming to solve those pain points in your organization and making those clear and articulating those to your senior leaders is super important. Somebody mentioned motivation earlier. Making sure that you link the increases in motivation and engagement that you see back to your L&D initiatives is really important. Highlighting it, communicating about it, all of that will play a good role. Line manager engagement. Now, quite a few hands went up earlier. Line managers are crucial to L&D. They bring L&D initiatives to life. Not just in terms of setting performance objectives, not just in terms of rewards and recognition, but really in terms of learning and making learning stick. So they are a crucial stakeholder for you within the L&D space. How can you best communicate with them? How can you communicate, and talk the same language they speak? That is all about listening and really having those conversations in the first place. Clearly defining the need and what you need from them as an outcome is important. Giving them options. You could be doing A, B, or C. What would work best for you and your department and your team so that they feel a sense of freedom and autonomy of choice? And similar to our senior leaders, making them feel important. They are important. They are that bridge between the senior leaders and the base of the organization, and making sure that their involvement will make a difference and that they know about that. Cool, that's what we had for line manager engagement. And we wanted to show a quick stat here, which is from the Matrix Leadership Program that we've highlighted earlier. We collect lots and lots of data. And lots of impact data as part of our programs. This is actually being collected on a weekly basis because it's a 9-week learning journey. And you can see here, when delegates have more than one conversation, there should be a 0 here and a 1 at the bottom. When delegates have more than one line manager conversation about their learning, their leadership capability and their learning in terms of the 5 different leadership capabilities that we've got as part of this program goes up massively by more than 40%. One conversation, one specific conversation with their manager about the learning they're undertaking. We thought that that was quite mind-boggling. We knew that would have an effect, but we finally actually have the data on it, and we were really excited to get that, so I wanted to share it with you. Learner time and capacity, here we are. I'll let you take those pictures. This was important for you earlier. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things on here. You will probably know all about the 70-20-10 model, right? Make sure that your learners know how they learn best. Often it's not the formal learning programs that will create the biggest learning. Often it's the peer learning. It's the line manager engagement. It's the learning on the job. It's learning as part of conferences like this one that will make the biggest difference. So highlight that to them. Show them the why. Why are we doing this? Creating the space for them. Designing transfer time into programs so that they can transfer the learning and not just be there in the classroom and when they have more formal interactions. Also letting the learners take the lead and making it interactive, making it fun, making it engagement, and providing that clarity on what's expected. So those are a few tips for learner time and capacity, and last but not least, measuring ROI and impact. And I just really wanted to highlight the using technology cleverly, because that was one of the points that was coming up earlier. And also highlight the point around asking stakeholders about the impact, because that's what we did. We've got one other little case study on here, and you can see one of the virtual classroom platforms that we use is Engagely. Engagely has a fantastic polling tool that we use as integrated polling on a live weekly basis, which has shown us the impact we're getting, the learning impact we're getting, and also highlights the learner engagement we've got in the classroom at any one point. That's fantastic for a facilitator to have, knowing that learners are engaged is hugely important. If you're seeing that engagement dropping, well, you can do something about it as a facilitator. So we would encourage you to sort of play with different platforms and classroom platforms, just to sort of try out what works for you, right? This is not the only platform we're using. This is one of the platforms that's working for us. Here we're looking at measuring one specific leadership capability within our Matrix program, and you can see this is something that we're actually testing on a weekly basis. So you can see these are some real figures that we can then feed back to senior leaders to get more buy-in from them. This is working because more than 70% are actually taking positive action within a week. Linking back to Gillian's point earlier about the forgetting curve, this is important. Otherwise, you end up with 10% of engagement and learning. Here, this gives you a brief view into what those weekly polls actually look like on Engagely. So you can see different options that people can click on. Have they applied something? Have they taken action? Have they applied the coaching process in a conversation because they've just learned about coaching, as an example? We then get the poll results as a facilitator, and we can then have a conversation about the things that resonated most. Or we can highlight something maybe where we get 0%, and we can ask a question. What are the reasons for you not having applied the learning or not having specifically focused on something? This really brings us to the end of our conversation almost, because we want to give you a quick chance to talk to each other, because you've digested quite a lot of new information and a lot of learning about our habit framework and the challenges you might face. And we'd like you, just going through this, we'd like you to have a quick partner discussion, a quick discussion here with your neighbor in terms of what is one of the levers of the habit framework that you can try and pull. What is maybe one of the challenges you feel a little bit more comfortable with that you can try and solve within your organization, and what can you do about it? And on the lovely postcards that you will hopefully have on your chair, you will see on the back, this is a little nudge for you to take action, right? We're asking you here, what's the one thing you can take action on? So if you still got time to have a 1 or 2 minute conversation with your neighbor, ask each other the questions that you've got on the screen, and then go away with that action point on your postcard.